Good morning. Happy Sunday. Welcome to your early morning intuitive guidance. I'm Dr. Bonnie Nussbaum, here with some words of wisdom to start your day off well. And I was sitting here thinking, it seems like the heat should kick on pretty soon. And all of a sudden I heard the igniter. It's like, man, I'm getting powerful here. I can predict the heat. Pretty awesome. So, happy Sunday. Hope you're off to a good start today. It's still dark as heck here, but have to tell you all, Diane and I went to Wicked yesterday. If you haven't seen it yet, that is the most full I have seen a theater, I think, forever. It was, almost every seat was full. It was wild. So, and there was even applause at the end, which is pretty interesting for a movie theater movie. So, yeah, quite interesting. So, today, I was sitting here thinking, what is it we might need right now? And so it's just kind of, I started journaling because I ended up getting up early. So I started my journaling, and all of a sudden it popped into my head, we haven't visited with Sharon Ellison in quite some time. So taking the war out of our words, the art of powerful non-defensive communication. Looks like someone's popped in. Joe Neal, good morning, dear. Glad you are here. Welcome, welcome. So taking the war out of our words, art of powerful non-defensive communication by Sharon Ellison. And, oh, you're going to, okay, well, you work out while I read us some good stuff. And why did I think this was a good thing to pick for today? Because it's holiday season, because we're in a certain season of our growth as a country, because we are, many of us, navigating through interesting times. So my dad's 90th birthday is approaching, and my sister and her family from Oregon are going to be coming to celebrate. And so yesterday we were working out some bugs in the system, etc. And I thought, this is good stuff for right here, right now. So let's start with some breathing. Jonil, let's see how well you do when you breathe when you're on the treadmill. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Let your shoulders drop. In through the nose, out through the mouth. And now someone else is popping on. Glad you're here. Welcome, welcome. In through the nose, out through the mouth. It's all the Michiganders here today. We've got the UP represented, and we've got Lower Michigan represented so far. So rock on with your bad selves. Glad you are here, ladies. In through the nose, out through the mouth. And I heard, yes, I heard the eastern part of the Yup got pounded. 25 inches of snow in 24 hours and more on the way. And I'm thinking, all those kids who went home from NMU downstate, hope they can make it back. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Glad to see you here, Carolyn. Yeah, so nuts weather. And God knows if the bridge will be open. We'll have to see how that goes too. So, yeah, we have no snow. And I am eternally grateful that right now we have no snow. So, this little section that I want to read to us and have us ponder actually not only is evidence of the war in our words, and that's a classic Michigan conflict is, who are you advocating for? Good morning, good morning. Thank you for the pretty hearts and the lovely rainbow. Speaking of rainbow, Randy Rainbow, come on, will you cough up a video? It is time. It is past time. I have been waiting with bated breath. So now I'm going to breathe instead. Time for some satire. Anywho, I got to tell you this quote too. I used this little piece of paper to mark my page so I knew where we were going to be reading today. And there's a quote on here from my friend. Moving at the pace of guidance. Moving at the pace of guidance. Isn't that cool? It's kind of a variation of don't drive faster than your guardian angel can fly. Moving at the pace of guidance. Just for your the pleasure to your ears. Moving at the pace of guidance. Love that. Anywho, what we're going to be going over, and again, the more times we go over this stuff, the more it becomes second nature, and we can begin to intervene and do some things differently. Taking the war out of our words, the art of powerful non-defensive communication. This is chapter 1, and it's on defensiveness. And the subtitle is The Only Self-Protection We Know. So I'm going to jump around a bit. I'm not going to be just strictly on page 7 for those of you who have the book, but I am going to start there, and then I'll try to identify where I've jumped to if you like to follow along in the book. So, defensiveness, the only self-protection we know. Good morning, Cindy. Glad you are here. Welcome. About time someone else rolled out of bed and joined us. The motto, to be open is to be vulnerable, and to be vulnerable is to be weak, underlies all the defensive maneuvers we use in war. We would be very unlikely to stand on an open battlefield with no protection unless we were on a suicide mission. Our openness would make us vulnerable to attack. We could be killed. I believe we use this same rule of war as the basis for how we talk to each other. Oof. Can already see where we're going. This isn't going to be good, right? We think that being guarded and closed is our best protection. Unfortunately, rather than offering us safety, our reluctance to be open can actually harm us. This chapter will detail how this axiom of the battlefield works and how show the devastating effect it has on all of our relationships. So I'm going to do a little description here of what she's talking about, and then I'm going to jump ahead almost to the end of the chapter. Defensive barriers in war and conversation. Dictionaries define protection as defending from attack. Holy crap, there it is in our words right off the bat. Wow. By carrying these associations from the battlefield into our conversations, we bring a war model to our communication. Good morning, Mel. Glad you're here. Welcome. Whole lot of youpers. This is good. Love my youper friends. We may become defensive anytime we feel a need to protect ourselves. And so we worked our way through this whole book previously. And what were we working on? Staying non-defensive, dropping the shoulders, taking a breath, asking our questions, making our statements, doing our predictions in as neutral a tone as possible. Is this easy? No. Is it worthwhile? A resounding yes. So let's keep going. Creating a barrier between ourselves and the other person is usually the first step in our defense. However, we protect different things when we talk to each other than we do in war. Rather than protecting our body, we seek to protect intangible things, such as feelings and beliefs. Do we see this happening anywhere? From being hurt and controlled, we try to protect our ego, our self-image. It doesn't take much for us to feel threatened by what someone says to us. Often, all a person has to do is say something in a judgmental tone, such as, "Isn't that report finished yet?" In an effort to protect ourselves from these keenly felt judgments, we automatically create an emotional barrier between ourselves and the other person. A youper hello to you too. Welcome, welcome. Emotionally, we go into the bunker. Emotionally, we go into the bunker. And how fast does it happen? For me, I usually feel it right in here. Good morning, Lisa. Glad you are here. It's like a lockdown feeling, like, oh, girding for whatever's going to come next, right? Is that going to be a productive stance to be in when you're trying to have a conversation with somebody? Let's just say no. So let's see where we go. During one of my workshops, I did a spontaneous role play to demonstrate how quickly we can become defensive. Using a critical tone, I asked a woman named Akaya, "Do you always peel potatoes that way?" Startled, she pulled back a little, narrowed her eyes, and then responded with subtle, playful defiance, "Yes." Her body language suggested that I should get out of her face. Everybody laughed, including Akaya. A few minutes later, she raised her hand and said, "You know, Sharon, I didn't even have a potato in my hand, and still my walls came up so much it took me a minute or two to be able to refocus on what you were saying." Although Akaya is a brilliant diversity consultant, like most of us, she became immediately defensive in response to a judgmental tone. So there again reiterates the importance of us watching our tone. When we're irritated, does judgment come flying out of our mouth pretty easily? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So taking that breath, and then as neutrally as possible, asking your question, making your statement, doing your predictions. Okay, let's keep going. If we so quickly create walls of separation over how we peel a potato, whether in a workshop role play or in our own kitchen, imagine what happens when the stakes are higher. When we are worried about the welfare of a child, an important change taking place at work, or an ethical issue facing our community or our nation. Ding, 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 ding. So yeah. So now I'm jumping ahead to page 57, and it's called A Cultural Epidemic of Abusiveness. Anybody? The grocery store lately? Oh my God. I would never go out on Black Friday. Forget it. A cultural epidemic of abusiveness. I believe that we have created a social environment that has reinforced the development of abusive character in a growing segment of our population. Clients and participants in my workshops regularly tell stories about experiences with people, even strangers, who react to not getting what they want with a level of anger that is on the edge of violence. Many of them now have tipped over into violence. In families, businesses, and institutions, we have oiled the squeaky wheel, giving people who use aggressive, blaming behavior what they want. Blaming others, even to the point of filing frivolous lawsuits, has become a way of life for many. Now she's talking about the aggressive personality type, and then I'm going to run through the 6 types of defensive maneuvering so that you can figure out what's my go-to. What do I tend to default to when I'm defensive? And then I'll talk just a little bit about, and what do we do about this, so I don't leave you in a place of, ew, I'll leave you in a place of some hopefulness. I have choices I can make here. I can do things differently. I can make this an experiment and see what happens. When I respond differently, what happens with the person who has that accusatory tone? This will be good. So the aggressive personality type. The behavior of aggressive personality types who misuse power and act belligerently can still be defensive at its core. And that's a useful thing to remember. Kind of the hurt people approach, when we can view this as defensiveness as opposed to aggressiveness, even though that's how it's presenting on the surface, we can respond differently and hopefully influence a different outcome. In the majority of cases, abusive people feel they are fighting for their own survival and are not conscious that they are attacking or manipulating someone else. Not conscious. Kind of see a whole lot of not conscious going on in our world, right? The daughter who has learned to get her way with aggressive accusations believes it when she tells her father, "You don't love me," as a way to avoid being punished for kicking her little brother. A lack of clear boundaries that require her to respect others has left her actually feeling like the victim. Feeling powerless and victimized, even when one's behavior is offensive and self-serving, is a trait many persons carry from childhood into adulthood. A bullying way of life based on counterattack blame often grows out of a dog-eat-dog view of the world. Even those who physically abuse others, including mass murderers, often present themselves as victims and blame someone else for their crimes. Again, to be able to see through the surface of this accusatory thing, well, it wasn't my fault I killed her, she did, blah, blah, blah. seeing through that to what's underneath and responding to what's underneath can move things forward. Okay, let's see here. Where was I? It is possible. Get this. This is so amazing. It is possible that all aggression inherently emanates out of defensiveness, a knife that arises out of the anguish of old wounds to pass on the pain and suffering. Yes, she said a bullying way of life. She did. Yes. So, here are the 6 possible defensive reactions. And one of the things that she said with these was there's some subtleties to them in different ways that different people can present them, but really, you can break down most of the defensive reactivity that we see in the world into these 6 categories, and that will be helpful in terms of figuring out what is going on here, right? So 6 defensive reactions. There are 3 categories: surrender, withdraw, counterattack. And then each one has 2. That is page 58. That is page 58. Let me take a drink here. I dug back out my morning routine self-care card. Thank you, Cindy. Appreciate it. And so now I'm trying to focus on drinking more water. Get rid of the trying. I am focusing on drinking more water. All right. So here's our 6. Under surrender, we have 2 options: surrender betray or surrender sabotage. Surrender betray is also known as the codependent personality type. So you give in to someone who treats you poorly, blaming yourself and making excuses for the other person. That's surrender betray, codependent personality type. You give in to someone who treats you poorly, blaming yourself and making excuses for the other person. Well, yeah, he hit me, but, I was pushing pretty hard, blah, blah. Surrender sabotage. That's the passive-aggressive personality type. Pretending you agree with someone who you think is treating you poorly and then doing something to undermine that person. That was all over Wicked, the surrender sabotage approach. That was the Ariana Grande character, Glinda. A whole lot of surrender sabotage. So those are the surrender ones. Now there's withdraw. There's withdraw escape and withdraw and trap. Withdraw escape is a passive personality type. You avoid talking about something you don't want to discuss in order to avoid conflict. My go along to get along person. Yeah, fine, we can do that. Withdraw and trap. That's the vindictive personality type. Refusing to respond to someone in order to draw that person into a situation where he or she may feel uncomfortable or act inappropriately. So, I've asked you a question. You choose not to respond. I ask you again. You cross your arms. I ask you again. And then will you just answer that question? And I become inappropriate. So, that's withdraw and trap. And the last chunk is most of what we've been talking about today, the counterattack. There's counterattack justify and counterattack blame. Counterattack justify is the defensive personality type. You respond to criticism by explaining your own behavior or making excuses. Well, I wouldn't have had to get drunk if you hadn't been such a jerk. And counterattack blame, the aggressive personality type. And this we are seeing all over the place. Attacking the other person's position in an attempt to defend yourself. So if I say to somebody, you just cut me off. Well, if you hadn't done blah, 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 I wouldn't. So, any of those 6 types of defensive reactions, which ones do you engage in? Which ones are you likely to indulge in? I do withdraw escape often, especially if I'm dealing with my sister. It's like, okay, I'm not going there. It's not worth the pissing match. Is this a hill I'm willing to die on? Nope. Well, I guess I'll just shut my mouth then. Not necessarily helpful. Not necessarily helpful. But what I have learned to do is buy some time, Okay, obviously right now is not a good, I was talking to her yesterday and she had a migraine. Would that be a good time, do you think, to have a conversation about something important? No. So leave it. Leave it. Yeah. Kind of, and Joe Neal's let them. I think that's a Mel Robbins thing. Let them. Wherever they're at, they're at. You don't have to engage at that point necessarily, and you can choose if it is something that you need to follow up on immediately in some way. Then that's your opportunity to practice non-defensive communication. I'm going to make my statement. I'm going to ask my question. I'm going to, what's my third one? Predict. I'm going to predict in as neutral a way as I can. If you keep yelling at me, I'm not going to continue this conversation. If you choose to respond to me calmly, I'm happy to keep talking to you. So you put it out there and you put out as many options as you can come up with. You've spent your life in counterattack. Yes. Getting better. Yes. This takes practice. This takes practice. And good that you're willing to practice. And yes, there are certain people who are much more adept, read our siblings and our parents, much more adept at pushing our buttons because they've had a lifetime of practice, right? Spouses, if you've been married a lot of years, spouses can do a really bang up job of this also. But when you choose to do something different, it can change the entire dynamic. I'll just pick one. You know, the spouses who kind of nitpick at each other, and it's, if you're the outsider with these people, it ain't fun. It's like, God, will you two just shut up? But either one of them could change that. So the one might make their little snarky comment. If the other person chose to engage in a different behavior, the dynamic would change. Good morning, Carolyn. Welcome. Glad to have you here. We're just about done. We're talking about communication and defensiveness in communication. So if the only thing you take out of this YEMIG today is the fact that there are these defensive ways of responding, reacting, let's call it reacting because that's what it is, and that you can choose instead to respond in a way that is non-defensive. And do we need practice at that? Absolutely we need practice at that. Do we need practice at removing warlike language? Absolutely we need practice with that. Is it worth practicing? Yes. Yes. And because right now there's 7 of you and me on this Zoom, not Zoom, Facebook Live. There's 8 of us that can go out into the world today and choose a different approach. Let go of reaction as best we can and try something different. So let's just say something went down at Thanksgiving that you're still kind of stewing about. Maybe today could be the day you approach that person and you say, you know, I was thinking about something that happened on Thanksgiving and I'm wondering if we could have a conversation about it. Neutral. And know ahead of time what is most important, that the point that you want to get across. So I'm going to make one up here. When you made a joke about my cooking at the Thanksgiving table, I felt upset. Other person is likely to go into counterattack, justify. Well, that wasn't that big a deal. You know, I was just making a joke. Can't you take a joke? Yada, yada, yada. And then your opportunity to reply again as neutrally as possible, you know. And when you choose to do this, does it sometimes stir up a little bit of strife? Yeah, because the other person then goes into their defensive posturing. Don't take the bait. Don't take the bait. Stay with as neutral as you can be. I can see that what we're talking about here sets off a defensive reaction. That wasn't my intention. My intention was to point out what didn't feel good to me and ask if we can come up with a different way of communicating. blah, 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 as neutrally as possible. And you might find to begin with, you can make it through maybe 2 back and forths, and then you devolve back into old behavior. Don't worry about it. Pat yourself on the back for making it through 2 rounds. Fabulous. Good. I'm glad it was a useful example. Then you just keep practicing. And over time, we move our language from this warlike, provocative, defensive, maneuvering, provoking conversation, and usually it's more of a monologue than a conversation, to more of a conversation where we can, it may feel fraught to begin with, but we're working on, I'm speaking my truth, I'm laying out options as I see them, I'm maintaining my connection with this person as best I can, even if they escalate, and I'm doing this to influence my communications, future communications with other people, communications worldwide. We get this many of us making changes, there's a ripple effect. Let's keep the ripple going, right? We all deserve to feel comfortable in our communications with others, and like we have the tools we need to navigate with the people who are still in that warlike approach, teaching them something new just through practice and helping ourselves feel more empowered, like we're honoring ourselves. So, taking the war out of our words. That was our practice for today, stepping away from our own defensive reactivity and into a much healthier way of being. Have an awesome day. Happy Sunday. We'll see you again tomorrow. Remember, you're capable of far more than you think you are. Bye-bye.